Hello, welcome to another Tweedy Pubs video. I'm going to be touring the pubs of Westminster today. Behind me we have the Albert on Victoria Street. Always been very fond of the way this sort of survives despite its giant neighbours. Sort of slightly surreal. A little slice of Victoriana clinging on twixt the skyscrapers. Reminds me slightly of the Crimson Permanent Assurance. I don't know if you've seen that supporting feature of Monty Python's Meaning of Life. It is listed, of course, and the Historic England listing for the Albert describes it as yellow brick with red brick dressing and stucco trim. Actually, I think the ground floor frontage is quite interesting as well. It was built in the 1860s by the Artillery Brewery, a name that still survives on in local streets. There's Artillery Row around the corner, the Artillery Mansions. The ground floor frontage here is Scandinavian granite, which is an architectural style that became popular in pubs a little later in that century, probably 1890. So this may have been a later addition. There are, in fact, two types of granite on display here. We have the darker foundational Norwegian Larkivite. I don't need to tell you all this, do I? You're intimately familiar with your types of Scandinavian granite, aren't you? The upper layers of frontage here, these fine looking pilasters, are a coastal red Swedish granite. The Albert is now the only Victorian building that remains on Victoria Street. You can see down there some mass skyscrapers and office blocks. This is the interior of the Albert. Lovely etched glass windows. Fair amount of original fixtures and fittings, I'm led to believe. There is a gallery in the stairwell of former Prime Ministers of the United Kingdom. Nice mural of Victoria and Alberton family. Some more recent incumbents there. They all apparently get a photo no matter how long they were in office for. The upstairs room at the Albert was at one time a sort of carvery restaurant. I think it's now just been absorbed into the pub as a whole. One of the main things I wanted to come here and see is the division bell. In fact, that's going to be a theme on a lot of today's tour of Westminster pubs. Division bells are used in the House of Commons to signify a vote. And it normally means that the MPs then have 8 minutes to get from wherever they are in the vicinity of the Houses of Parliament back to the Houses of Parliament to vote. I think in practice this system is now largely obsolete and most MPs are just alerted by their phones, but it is a delightful old tradition. I love the idea that on an average working day it's just expected that our representatives in Parliament, not actually in Parliament, you know, doing their jobs, ratifying laws, are often sort of sitting around in the local pubs and restaurants just enjoying themselves, and you know, there needed to be a system devised to actually get them back to Parliament to, you know, do their jobs. As a small aside, it looks like it would actually take 12 minutes to walk from here to the Houses of Parliament, the Palace of Westminster, but I have actually seen years ago the division bell go off in a pub, and what happens in practice is that the Parliament, or perhaps the individual parties, send out cars to go and round up the MPs and, as I say, get them back into Parliament and actually do their jobs. Today it's run by Green King. I'm having a landlord here, just a half. I've got quite a few pubs to get to on today's itinerary. Came in at £3.05, so I assume that means that a pint would be £6.10. Two chairmen here. Possible claim to being Westminster's oldest pub, with a pub on this site dating back to 1729. Always those dates need to be taken with a slight pinch of salt. The name, of course, refers to sedan chairs, the era of sedan chairs as depicted on the sign. The wealthy would be carried home after a night of excess by two poor schmoes who had to lug not only the weight of the chair but the weight of its occupant. The reason for naming that particular pub the Two Chairmen is that historically it was used as a place for the chairmen manning the sedan chairs to wait while their potential patrons were at the Cockpit Theatre, all of which remains today is Cockpit Stays. Does make for a very nice shortcut down to St James's Park Westminster. Possibly still functioning gas lamps. As you can see, it opens out down here to St James's Park. Location of the cockpit was at the bottom of these steps, close to St James's Park, and it was a location for cockfighting, as depicted in Hogarth in a engraving / oil on canvas from the 1750s. The cockpit here was demolished by about 1816, which happens to have coincided with the demise of the sedan chair as the hackney carriage became a more popular and more affordable means of transport. Cheers. Black Sheep, £2.95 for a half, just under the £6 mark for a pint then. Simple pub, inside sort of unfussy, but I don't know, I have a sort of an affection for the two Chairmen. I've been coming here on and off for about 15 or so years, I think, just infrequently, but what I would say though is that that little snifter of Black Sheep is in beautiful form. The Speaker, Great Peter Street. I have rather mixed feelings about revisiting that pub, if I'm honest. I knew it 15-ish years ago when it was, whether or not it technically was a free house, it felt very much like a free house back then. Very independent, very unique pub. It had this wonderful sign on the window saying no fruit machines, no music, just good beer and good conversation, or something of that ilk. It had a refurb in 2018, and I'd seen reports of people saying that it was much needed, but I really rather liked the old shabby version of the Speaker, ran by a very characterful landlord called Dennis. Always had very good selection of beers. They used to specialise in miles, particularly. I think, was it May? Maybe they created this idea of May being mild month. I mean, it hasn't completely lost its way. There's certainly there was a respectable selection of real ales on the bar there. The Exeter Brewery Avocet Ale, is it not really my style? Very light, and that was something like £3.20 for a half. So making it the most expensive beer so far, and the one I actually like the least of the three so far on today's outing. It's owned today by a company called Stonegate, who I have to admit I hadn't actually heard of, and it turns out they are in fact the biggest owner of pubs in the UK, and that's the sort of weird state we find ourselves in today, that there's been all these sort of conglomerates and mergers. Okay, next pub. It's going to be a challenge to get a good vantage point of this, given the construction work going on here. But over there, hopefully beyond the plastic barriers and the cars, you can see the Westminster Arms. That's just hilariously unfortunate, really, because I've always thought this is quite a handsome pub. It's certainly not one of Westminster's oldest. Dates back to the current building to, I believe it says on the front there, 1918. What's called the Red Lion up until at least the 1940s, and then sometime from the 1970s onwards rebranded itself as the Westminster Arms. Perhaps not least because there's another Red Lion in the proximity of Parliament Square. This street is in fact called Storey's Gate. This isn't Parliament Square here, but we're very close to Parliament Square.
And someone was saying it's actually
Westminster Arms there. Shepherd Neame pub. I think the late red came in at, was it £3 on the dot? And it's actually one of Shepherd Neame's nicer beers. A bit of mixed feelings about their beer offering generally, but late red, the sort of autumnal seasonal beer, is actually not bad. Westminster Arms, haven't really seen it in its best light today with all the construction work going on outside, but I'm weaving between all these rental bikes here. But it is quite a handsome pub, perhaps not particularly venerable. I'm guessing my current location needs no introduction. Here I am on Parliament Square. We go, the St Stephen's Tavern. You could be forgiven for dismissing the St Stephen's Tavern as a sort of bit of a tourist trap, but actually I think it has some real merit. I mean, despite the fact it sits, if I spin you around with some terrible camera work, it sits directly opposite that tower we shall not yet name for fear of being told I'm calling it the wrong thing. It's a Hall and Woodhouse pub, and I may have already bemoaned the... what's the word I'm looking for? Preponderance of chain pubs slash pubco pubs in this bit of central London. But Hall and Woodhouse is one, to be honest, I don't particularly mind. It's a Dorset brewer. They don't have a huge number of pubs in London. A handful as far as I'm aware. I quite like their beer. They're a little bit different, unusual, and I can forgive this one being part of a sort of pubco slash brewery. Get a sense of the height of the ceiling here. Very majestic front bar room here in the St Stephen's Tavern. Okay, so let's deal with the big elephant in the room. I don't care what you call that tower behind me. It's fine. I'm a great believer in democracy, and if the majority of people want to call the tower Big Ben, call it Big Ben. I don't care. It's fine. It has had all these weird various names over the course of history, including well, more recently it was officially renamed the Elizabeth Tower, which I think is a nice touch. I'm happy to call it that. And prior to that, had colloquially been referred to sometimes as St Stephen's Tower, but any pedants on the internet who tell you that that's the real name of the tower, I would question that, because it possibly is just a sort of affectation of the Victorian era media. St Stephen's was a sort of colloquial name for the Houses of Parliament at that time, and they tended to refer to anything that came out of the House of Parliament colloquially as this is what St Stephen's has said, and then, you know, correspondingly the tower that we now mostly call Big Ben and or Elizabeth Tower was occasionally referred to as the St Stephen's Tower. However, none of that is relevant to why, well, it's somewhat relevant, but the St Stephen's Tavern is named after the St Stephen's Chapel, which is part of the Palace of Westminster, which was the original home of the House of Commons before it was all rebuilt in the, was it the 1830s or something of that ilk. Perhaps not seeing from the side of St Stephen's Tavern here in the alleyway, perhaps not seeing it in its absolute best light, but the current building dates to 1875. Portland stone and some brick. See the brick perhaps more towards the back. And the Historic England listing for the building describes it as eclectic French Renaissance style. Is it? I don't know. I'm not an architect. I rather like that. It sounds kind of fancy. This is the division bell in St Stephen's Tavern. Sort of enclosed there. Not obvious what it is, but the thing beneath the clock. Apparently this one actually still works. It was working as recently as yesterday. Not all of them do. Okay, final pub, maybe. This is the Red Lion on Parliament Street. Current building is dates to the 1890s, and according to the, it is listed, according to the Historic England listing, it is in an eclectic Flemish Baroque style. And that probably refers to the gable up at the top with the Red Lion motif. A bit unclear where the division... Do you know where the division bell is these days? No? Nobody seems to be sure anymore where exactly the division bell at the Red Lion is. I'm sure this is the pub that I have actually been at some point. Many years ago, 10, 15 years ago, and the division bell went off. And it was quite an exciting moment. A load of cars turned up from the Houses of Parliament over there, which is what, a 3-minute walk. But you know, I suppose if you only have 8 minutes to get there, you don't want to give it. You don't want to take the chance of people dawdling and missing the vote. But whether or not it's actually here or in any way visible anymore, nobody in the red line that I asked at least seems to know. Okay, well that's it for today then. I will say goodbye from the Red Lion. That's 6 pubs in Westminster, most of them within a Division Bell's walk, Division Bell 8-minute timeout walk of the House of Parliament. Hope that's been interesting. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.